Good morning, good evening, good afternoon again. Thanks to the early risers, Michelle Taylor joining us from New York, and I'll do some introductions in a moment. I'm Chris Robb, the CEO of Mass Participation World, and delighted to be hosting with you today the new normal. Will there be opportunities for brands in mass participation sport? And I'm fairly certain that we're going to have a fairly robust conversation today. We've got a great panel here, and delighted to welcome and introduce Giles Morgan, Executive Vice President of Pumpjack Dataworks from London. Hello, Giles, welcome.
Thank you, Chris.
Good to see you. James Robinson, Chief Commercial Officer, Limelight Sports, also in London.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, James. Michelle Taylor, Global Head Sports Sponsorship, Charter Consultancy Services in New York. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, great to be here.
Great to see you. And Matt Rogan, Non-Executive Director and Strategic Advisor, co-founder Two Circles, also joining us from London. Welcome, Matt.
Hi there.
Good to see you all. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get underway. Please stay mute so we don't get any feedback through. I have both the chat and Q&A up, so please at any stage feel free to pop your questions in there. I'll do my best to weave them into the conversation as we go through. And just a couple of initiatives. I share these every week, but forgive me if you've heard them before for some of the new people. A new one that you may not be aware of, I just announced yesterday, and some more information or surveys will be going out soon. The intention to stage a Mass Participation World online summit in September, and looking for feedback based on the feedback that's come back already. It looks quite likely that it will be the first week of September, but we'll come back to you with more news on that. Would really value the input of the industry to help us shape the program. And that's been posted on LinkedIn, Facebook, and surveys will be going out to the database soon. The Strength in Numbers call every Monday at 4:30 p.m. Singapore time. Quite a few of the people that regularly join me there on that are on the call tonight, so welcome to those people. And if you're interested in joining up on that, on the Mass Participation World Facebook page and my LinkedIn. The Aid Station, today we just released, I think, edition 57 or 58, and we're going all around the world with that. So they're short interviews with people from the industry all over the world that go out each day of the week. And then our weekly web events every Thursday, round about this time, depending on our panelists. Tonight I'm going to put a poll out just to get a sense of some of the things people are looking for. But next week is either going to be about, we're going to talk about data tonight, undoubtedly, but a deeper dive into data and managing data and how you can use data. And also it'll either be that or it'll be risk management, but would really value your input on that survey that we put through later. And as always, if I can help in any way, send questions to me, chris@chrisrob.asia. Connect with me on LinkedIn or Facebook, and very happy to help there where I can. Before I quickly now move on to just talk about some of the key areas that we're going to discuss, I'm going to just pop another poll out there just to get a sense of where people are within the industry. I can't find that, so let me just keep going. So we're going to really try and touch, and there's so much to talk about in this space, but we're going to focus on 5 main areas tonight. We're going to talk about how the mass participation opportunity differs from professional sport, and how does the industry need to re-educate itself and brands accordingly. I think what we'll hear is that typically, some of the measures and parameters are very similar as to how sponsors might be analyzing their investments in mass and traditional and professional sport, and there's lots of differences, we believe. We'll obviously talk about the role of data. We'll talk about how mass participation addresses areas such as B2B, B2C, B2 employee, and other categories, and whether you as rights holders, and we obviously have a lot of those on the call, are clear on what it is that the offering that you give. And we'll hear some different perspectives on that. We'll talk about what skill sets and tools are needed to sell and activate in the new area. And then obviously there's a massive growth in virtual events. And we'll talk about the role of collaborative technology in terms of helping brands and events to engage with their communities. So in terms of getting underway, I'm going to throw to you, Matt, to give us a bit of a sense of how the mass participation opportunity may differ from professional sport, And, obviously looking forward to a collaborative discussion between the panel, and I'll jump in and out as we go forward. So over to you to take that one away to start, please, Matt.
Sure, happy to. Hi, everyone. I guess there are probably three things I'd characterise as particularly different in terms of dynamics between mass participation sport and professional sports. And I guess, the first one is probably the level of immersion. So, one of my all-time sporting highlights personally is being on the same starting line as Paula Radcliffe when she ran her world record at the London Marathon. Now, of course, I was about 3 pens behind her and didn't start quite the same time that she started, but the fact that I could be on the same starting line was just incredible. And of course, that's a significant difference to the wide world of professional sports, where I might be in a seat watching, but I'm nowhere near the front of the pack or even the middle of the pack. What comes with that, I think, as a second difference is the subtle difference, but important difference in terms of the customer base. If you think about from a two circles perspective, managing scale data sets, you might be managing 5 to 10 million data set across a professional sports league or a professional sports team of scale. And that's not the reality in terms of working with a mass participation organizer. That does not for a minute mean that it's not a valid source of brand investment. It just means it's very different. And so to that extent, it's almost a depth versus breadth challenge. Neither is better, but you have to understand that distinction as an investing brand, I would suggest. And the third thing that's very relevant as well, I think, is that the primary source of revenue for the business model of a professional sports league, team, club would predominantly be broadcast. If you look at it from a mass participation perspective, it would predominantly be entries, race entries still. And so, on one level, you've got a lot more differences and similarities there because the level of immersion is different, the customer base is different, and the revenue mix is different. And so, from a brand perspective, I think the importance underneath that is just to understand and appreciate two different organisations for what they might offer in that regard.
Thanks. Why don't we throw over to you, Giles, with someone who's spent a lot of time looking at the pro sports from your role with HSBC, and get some of your insights, please.
Well, I think something that Matt has in fact been one of the leaders in over the last decade or so is trying to convince an industry that the evaluation model for sponsorship may be not what it thought it was, which was traditionally television over 60 or 70 years. And whilst there's a lot of value to television data and eyeballs, as I guess they're called, the real value is about the individual, as he alluded to, about people who care, people who are emoted. And I think that the industry for a long, long time was just not able to qualify or quantify the true value of those individual fans or participants as we talk about mass participation. And therefore, if television was the yardstick for success and mass participation isn't particularly, there is television, but it's not the sales point, it's the people, it always went down the pecking order. And certainly that's why companies like HSBC looked at it, but it wasn't for them. You flip that round now in a modern era where the ability to extract data, the ability to know so much about people, particularly mass participation, where for anybody who's involved, from training, from travel, from accommodation to the race itself, all of those things provides and yields an enormous amount of information, which to brands is nirvana. That's what they're trying to get. They're trying to understand consumer. So I think the paradigm is shifting. I think that brands like Two Circles have done a really important job, and now you've got new brands and products like Pumpjack, who I now work alongside, are telling the data story, not just because it's a new kid on the block, it's actually the currency for the future of sport. And mass participation sits, in my view, in a really uniquely advantageous place because already so much data exists about people involved, and they, to Matt's point, are emoted and they are part of it, and they are the ultimate brand ambassadors.
Thanks, Giles. Michelle, I see you nodding, and obviously you've kind of sat on both sides of the fence many years at New York Roadrunners, and now looking after, you know, in my sense, and I stand corrected, but certainly one of the biggest sponsors of mass participation in the globe, maybe even the biggest. Obviously, a lot of the endemic brands put a lot of money in, but from a non-endemic brand, I'd say you'd be right up there. I'd love to get, you know, your perspective on the differences, please.
Yeah, I think another difference, and I think it was said in maybe a different way, is the uniqueness of mass participation sport. And in tradition, or not say traditional, but in pro sports, the players are essentially employees, right? And they are protected in some ways and advocated for in some ways by their contracts, their agents, and the players associations. And in mass participation sports, the players, so to speak, are the customers, right? And they don't necessarily have the same protections from whether it's like a players union, right? So in a lot of ways, the event organizers and the sponsors have to, as part of their responsibility, look out for that constituent, and as they should, they're their customer, right? But it puts an extra onus on the event organizers to not just organize amazing events, but make sure that they are looking out for this constituent of athletes, right? And I think that drives a lot of the passion that participants have for their sport, because they feel like they are being cared for, right? And that's people that share their passion with them are investing. And I think that's important.
It was really interesting that, I mean, I spoke about the aid station, and, you know, as I said, now up to edition 57, and you were one of my guests, but, you know, the common theme that comes out all over the world, you know, I interviewed a lady today in Ecuador, and, you know, the common theme is passion, passion, passion. The people in this industry doing jobs that is their passion. You know, this lady started with a hobby in cycling, and she now runs a Gran Fondo in New York and distributes a brand across 3 countries in Latin America, and very passionate about it. James, how about you?
I think what I would like to add to what the panel has already said is, for me, it's about the participant is not a passive participant. So they're not either watching the sport or you know, in a stadium or on television, which does make them more receptive to brand messaging, because a lot of the time, for the majority of people who are taking on these challenges, they are taking on a life-changing experience where they are committing a huge amount of time to get physically fit to achieve this challenge. And I think if you look at the data and the brand insights, when you're involved in an event, running a London Marathon or whatever event it is that you're taking part in, the brands that help you achieve your goal are brands that you are much more likely to support in the future. So I think being an active participant in the space has a huge opportunity for the brands involved.
Yeah, great insight there. And one of the things we spoke about last night on the planning call is, you know, this difference, but the industry generally hasn't told the story really well. And, you know, the second part of my question there is, how does the industry re-educate, I think, itself? You know, we spoke about the fact, I think some of you were at MPW in Singapore last year, and one of our speakers, Andrew Griffiths, said we're a toddler in the terms of industry. And I think it's very true. This industry that's, you know, now being forced to grow up pretty fast with the challenges of COVID. So we need to, I guess, educate ourselves, but we also need to educate the brands. And, you know, any sense on how we do that? Obviously, Limelight's just, you know, made a pivot, change your offering to agree. As part of that, that's the education of yourselves as a player in the industry, but educating brands as well.
Absolutely, yeah. This it coincides about a week ago today. We actually relaunched the agency to unlock the power of participation, and based around data, which we'll come on to in due course. But I think as a whole, the industry as a whole has been slightly guilty of underselling the value of the space. I think we revert too quickly to the features and benefits of an event, and we start selling the value of a logo on a bib, or 10 social media posts to an engaged audience. So I think from a re-education point of view, we've really got to start to sell the value of mass participation, the value of creating opportunities that resonate from a purpose or a life-changing perspective, and also tap into the emotional side of the mass participation opportunity. And for me, that's where we've got to go to. Giles mentioned earlier that the majority of mass participation events don't have the luxury of mass broadcast. So we don't have the traditional old school Nielsen report of X million pounds worth of value for your brand. So we do have to really sell the value of the data and the audience, which is very rich and untapped at this stage.
And Chris, I would go further than that. And I'd sort of say this slightly looking in the mirror of some shame that for many, many years, 13 or something, I had the privilege of running a very, very big budget globally. And I think I had been hoodwinked, like maybe most of the sponsorship industry, but I definitely had, that somehow there was a connectivity between seeing a logo, let's say at a sports event, and making a sale. And I don't know anybody who has ever bought a mortgage because they saw a perimeter board at a sporting event. And if they had, I would kind of look at them quizzically. The best that old-fashioned sponsorship could really do is about generating awareness and association. But it's pretty passive. And it was very much a monologue where you see some sort of signage and then you leave it up to the consumer to decide whether that affinity is going to drive anything forward. And that isn't recorded. And that's why sponsorship, something I've been talking about a lot, has always been the poor cousin of the advertising mix back in the day, because there was no business case. And if you don't have a business case, brands will do things in good times, but right now we're facing pretty bad times. And if you can't make the business case, which is about proper interaction between brand and consumer, then as I know, because I went through the global financial crisis, budgets get cut. If you make a business case, which is about direct to consumer, and I don't mean this necessarily in a B2C way, I mean a direct to consumer that can be in a business conversation as well, then you've got a really strong opportunity for brands who struggle in that arena because they're largely commoditized and they're fighting against competition. And this is where I think mass participation, and indeed the whole sponsorship industry, has got an opportunity, because in, say, the non-sports world, like museums or attractions, concerts, in the old day, no TV, no real value, so you get less money. In a data-rich world, and I know we'll come on to it, now you've got real information about real people. And that's what brands want. So I'm talking about, I mean, we've got a few rocky years ahead, obviously, because of what's happened, which was unheralded and unscheduled, and you couldn't have predicted it unless you're a very bright American Microsoft founder, I guess. The real opportunity for mass participation is about unearthing real people in dynamic data terms. And it's really exciting. There's a golden age eventually coming to our industry.
Interesting, Michelle. I'd like to get your take on that, and let's start, kind of moving down the data. I'm just going to put a poll into the group again, but just let's kind of start to segue into the data with that and get your insights into that as a sponsor.
Yeah, now as a sponsor, I think one of the keys to getting it right, which is we're all striving to do, both from a property standpoint and a brand standpoint, is know your why, right? Know your purpose and make sure what you're doing is grounded in that. And I think that the clearer and you can be around that and understanding it, and what and from a data perspective, put measurements around what that means, right? It's not just a beautiful vision. It's very measurable ways that you're going to line what you're doing back to your core objectives, back to your company values, back to your purpose, right? And I think the more we start to do that, and as been mentioned before, get away from this sort of transactional behavior, that's what's going to ensure the long-term, success of both brands and events.
And do you see, sitting on the rights holder side of the fence, I'm sure you have proposals and inquiries landing on your desk, you get bombarded with them without any shadow of doubt. How often is a business case being made? And, you know, I've just put a poll up to ask people how they use data in that. And, you know, right now it's trending that most people rate themselves a 3 on a scale of 1 to 5. But, you know, how often are they coming with that kind of data that matches with your target demographic and your objectives?
Yeah, it's most often it's not the properties that are coming with that data. We have to do that research on our own if it's something that we think fits. I mean, we generally don't, when properties send us opportunities, we'll evaluate and see. But honestly, most of the right fits for us are things that we've investigated ourselves and then outreach to. Right. And it's just because we've done that research and we know what we're after and we know the gaps we need to fill. But it's a very methodical process. And even for me, Tata Consulting Services is it's a tech company, right? Everything we do is analyze and research and look at the data. And for me, that was really different, right? Coming from the sports industry and coming into this position, that was so new. I was used to, even on the property side, we certainly looked at objectives. We wanted to make sure that we were meeting sponsors' objectives, but never to the degree in which it needs to be proven, right, from a data perspective. And that's been eye-opening for me. I think it's actually made me better at what I'm doing because we need to find ways to measure, right? And it's not just pictures, great glossy pictures and recaps. It is really those specific metrics that go back to our objectives that get us the funding internally.
Thanks for that. Matt, your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So the first thing I think I'd say is we can get a bit confused with terminology. So the best way I would say to think of data is a Lego brick, right? So it's pretty useless in isolation. It's about how you put different data sets and different pieces of intelligence together to build nice models. And what I think is nice about the way that the Limelight team have rebranded their operation is say, look, actually fundamentally, they're changing their operation to be driven by insight into their audiences. And it's not just the hard kind of technology that underpins that. It's genuine, implicit understanding of how their audiences behave to drive return. And I think frankly, I think it's pretty hard to justify even today, I would say, for a mass participation sport organizer, focusing on a huge data and technology stack purely in regards of sponsorship growth. I think you miss a trick unless you're using it for new product development, for churn management, for sales forecasting, for satisfaction of people who come through your races, for where you put the toilets, you know, all those other things as well. It can also be hugely useful for if you just put the Lego bricks in a different direction. In respect of sponsorship specifically, I think we need to be really careful because what we're not talking about, and I don't think Giles is talking about either, is using data in a way that enables you to have the same conversation about audience reach as Manchester United. It's about using data insight, putting the Lego bricks together to give you real intelligence on a specific audience group that you can provide something really compelling to a brand. That's what I think we're talking about in this regard.
And I've got to follow up on that. For instance, is if it had been in another era, the amount of time my former employer could have found out about the golf industry or the golfer, be it participant or spectator, could have been game-changing. And it's exactly to Matt's point, is that you can have a monologue, you can have a very one-way conversation, which is what television gives you. And that gives you an awareness, which is quite helpful. But if you've got real insight and you know where people are, who people, it's much more than socioeconomics, it's about habit. You've got a really, really strong way of then talking the story to people who are most likely to be already coerced and part of the conversation. And that's why it is exciting, because I think mass participation, I'm someone who's built for comfort, not speed. So I'm not speaking as someone from this industry, but I'm certainly talking about people. I understand the passion of, and this is proper engagement, participation. In fact, people participate in mass participation in a way that many other sports can't come close to. And that means you've got real insight, or have the ability to mine insight.
And I think that, I mean, great point there is, and Matt's point about using the data to engage the journey. I mean, we're in this unique situation where someone signs up for an event, they give us approval to have their data. And then, in many instances, you still see the Dear Chris entries for the marathon have opened and no link to, photos of me participating last time or the time I ran in on the most basic level, let alone other stuff, which I'm guessing is part of your new offering, James, it's not just as Matt pointed out, the single Lego brick of selling sponsorship, but it's a stack of bricks which chart the whole journey, which very few people in my mind in the industry are doing as a rights holder, let alone bringing a brand to the table to be able to share that journey with them. And I think, sometimes I see even brands get involved. And I know, Michelle, that, it's something that I think you're exploring to build that ongoing engagement with that portfolio of people that you're working from. But maybe do you want to speak to that a little bit, James, about the role of data in terms of building that engagement on an ongoing basis through the journey from sign up to race and beyond race?
Absolutely, and thank you, Matt, for your kind words about Limelight's repositioning. You've done my job for me on that one. Yes, so from our perspective, the data element, as people have said, it's the amount of data that we can gain from individuals when they're involved in this process from start to end is quite significant. And Giles made a point earlier on the call yesterday about his love of Bruce Springsteen. And if he was given opportunities to get something from Bruce Springsteen or a reduction in merchandise costs from Bruce Springsteen, he would give up even more data. And I think that's the opportunity that we have in this space, is we can acquire a huge amount of data about the individual. And I think we all need to move towards that single customer view. And the deeper and the richer the data that we have on the individual means that the more we can tailor that towards brand opportunities. So our new proposition with Active World Intelligence is really delving as deeply as possible into the data of the individual, acquiring more data by asking them stuff, learning stuff, competitor analysis about what they've done. We've got their race times, we've got their personal bests, we've got everything that they're going on there. And what we can do is we can segment that data in all sorts of different ways, and then really go to a brand with a rich pool of data. And it doesn't have to be millions and millions and millions of data, because if you've got 10,000 people who pretty much everything about them, that's an incredibly powerful value that you can take to a brand. And by creating a bespoke opportunity, you're then building something that the brand needs and the customer wants, which is, for me and for Limelight, the perfect combination.
And I think the key thing, if I can just jump in, James said there, is that's the starting point. So if you have a really rich group of 10,000 people who inside out and back to front, too many rights holders, we notice in the mass participation sports space, still that's the end point of the conversation. We've got these people, we hold their data, you can talk to them, as opposed to saying that insight that we gather from those people is the starting point to put something bespoke, which will specifically drive certain revenue lines or shave certain cost lines that you hold. And that's an entirely different conversation. Hopefully answers a little bit more some of the questions Michelle was holding in her head, which is kind of, why am I having to do all these hard yards myself? You should be doing those a little bit more elegantly for me. And it isn't just, here's our database, talk to them. That's the worst thing you can do to abuse everyone's confidence.
What about, thanks, Matt, what about the kind of halo effect, ripple effect of, Matt's a runner who participates in the event, and his kids get involved and his wife gets involved. And I think, that opportunity that's potentially being missed there as well. We talk about the 10,000 participants, but as James has said, it's 10,000 participants going on a journey, but it's a much bigger audience that there's potentially opportunities to engage with as well.
Well, I'll just dive in here just very quickly. One of the things that I was taught very early on in my marketing career, and this has got nothing to do with the real power of marketing for many, many sports is the most powerful place that you can be in most middle-class households is the magnet on the fridge where the family unit operates, you know, who's doing what, where, when, during the weekend. Now that's it's a nice visual, but if you can get the insight of what the family household is doing, from kids going to school, from people going away on holidays, and you know what I mean by that fridge magnet and the kind of note that you have. It's a bit old school, it's certainly not data, but that's actually where that's the headspace you want to get into. That's where brands want to get into, is who's doing what when. Because remember, most brands, and I think it's really important most brands have no right to be involved with the sport or the entertainment they're involved with per se, unless they're a product that's in that sport, right? What they're doing is they're being parasites, positive parasites, where they're jumping on the back of. But what they're really trying to do is sell their product. And if they're doing sponsorship and not trying to sell something, then that's not a business case, which means that the sponsorship has a fatal flaw in downtime. It can be a nice to do, but not a have to do. The demonstration that the association can push sales is where the value comes to for organizations looking to use sponsorship commercially. And that's where we keep pushing back into this insight on data, is that then becomes a business. I know I'm focusing on sponsorship. Matt's quite right. The opportunity for data for rights holders sits in so many other buckets as well to grow revenue. But just on sponsorship, if you can demonstrate to a sponsor that you're in the heart of the hearth, whether that, I don't just mean families, but clearly that's a very powerful socioeconomic, you're in a very different conversation. And one of the things that I wouldn't say I regret, but had I known then what I know now, I think that the sponsorship budgets that I would have got, which were colossal, would be 25 to 30% bigger if I'd made a more formalized business case rather than an emotive and an assumptive case based on fairly faulty old-fashioned media data. And that's the difference.
Talking about that, and we obviously know HSBC was involved in cycling for a while. You might not have all the answers, but interested to see in these times that they've recently pulled out of their sponsorship of cycling. Any thoughts or insights into why that might be?
Yeah, look, I don't know the reasons why. I can guess that it's obviously the world's gone into an economic downturn and they're cutting budgets. My sadness about that, and it's none of my business, this is just opinion, is I was very proud of that sponsorship which was done 3 or 4 years ago, because it was designed as a societal partnership, and Matt was involved at Two Circles at the time with British Cycling. I remember it well. Is that this was an organisation that was trying to get involved with the community of the UK. And if you think about the relationship that people have with a bicycle, it's probably only a degree of separation away from anyone. And I don't even mean old people who don't ride, but their grandchildren might. Everybody has a relationship with a bike to some extent or another. And I felt that it was a very powerful partnership. But I suspect that the reason it was cut compared to some of the other sponsorships is that a proper business case to support it was not made in time, which was actually about getting to the hearts and minds and the interaction of daily life of everyday British citizens, which is, after all a bank is trying to do, particularly a retail bank. So I was sad to see, I'm always sad to see any sponsorships cut, because it's very rare that sponsorship directors or heads of sponsorship, this is one of the myths. People think that the sponsorship director is the powerful person that makes the yes/no decision. I've never met a sponsorship director, and I was one for many years, who wanted their budget cut. They just don't. They want to hold on to the crown jewels. They want the train set. Everybody wants the biggest train set they can get. But if you don't have the business case and you get into a downturn, which we are now, you can point a company in the right direction, but if the fuel runs out, i.e. the cash, then the sponsorship will go nowhere and it will get cut. The business case is wrong, or rather not articulated. Sponsorship traditionally and historically has always been the first to go. And what people like, obviously James is now doing, what Matt's been doing for years, and what I'm now doing as sort of poacher turned gamekeeper, is to try and redress the story of value. Because if you change that story, budgets may come. If you don't, sponsorship in good days will be great because people can do it and it becomes discretionary spend. but it's not essential spend. What sponsorship needs to do is to get into the budget, into the bucket of essential to do to sell. And that's where I'm hoping that we can take the industry. That's the opportunity for this industry.
Thanks, Giles. Some great insights, everyone there. Why don't we move on to the thing about how does mass participation address different, I guess, client bases? Is it B2B, B2C, B2 employee, sometimes a combination of all? And you spoke about this a little bit last night on the planning call, Michelle, as you know, you're fundamentally involved with massive mass participation events, but it's a B2B proposition for you, and love to get your insights and your challenges in that. And I'm going to just pop a poll in as well as we do that.
Sure. And this has been so interesting to see how things evolve over the years. I mean, not only were we B2B, B2B, when we got into this, we also we're not an endemic to the sport, right? 10, 12 years ago, technology wasn't what it is today, where it is incredibly endemic to everything, right? Not just sport. So I think that's been a really interesting ride all around, especially as we're talking through data just now. But, you know, for us, I think, again, because we are really solid in our core objectives, employee engagement is one of them, and we have a huge number of employees. And anytime you can get your employees to think and be healthier and fitter, that's going to serve a company well, right? So I think that's a great driving force, a great benefit of the space that we're all in. But measuring the business value continues to be the trickiest metric of all of the objectives that we have. How we draw that line continues to be the trickiest metric to get to, but we look at it from a lot of different angles, right? There's not always just one way to view it. We look at how many clients can we engage in what we do through our sponsorships, how many prospects can we engage, how many relationships, not only just engage them, but what is the output of within a time space, year over year, of that engagement resulting in an impact on that business, right? And the business relationship. We look at how stories are told through our sponsorships, how our brand message is presented, and the impact that has in general, but then also on our targets, trying to see how that is delivering back direct value.
Thanks, Michelle. You mentioned the staff one, which is obviously it's almost a case study, isn't it, TCS? And then you spoke about the business case. I mean, is the staff element measured in a business sense? So you know, does TCS say our staff participating in these massive numbers in Mumbai Marathon, TCS New York Marathon, and so on, saves us X amount of medical costs, creates this much value of increased productivity? Is any analysis done on that?
Right. Yeah, that is definitely part of the equation, right? And it's such a win-win all around, right? I think that's what's really the best part of it, is that it absolutely factors in and helps ground us in what we're doing.
Yeah. So you and I'm not expecting you to necessarily share the figure, but internally, TCS can put a number and say our sponsorships of these events generates this much of value from a staff perspective, or is that a metric that's still not really being measured? It's more anecdotal.
It's measured. I don't know that it's ever been. It's more like a percentage, right? Versus a concrete dollar value, right? But it's definitely a percentage metric of how is this driving back value directly to the company.
Oh, thank you.
There are some very good case studies in around London 2012 in that regard from the Olympics, which is most like mass participation in some ways, because there's no media, there's no lazy things to put logos on, so you have to think more creatively about how you make something come alive. I actually did a bunch of the modelling for London 2012, trying to isolate the employee upside for a bunch of projects, and the way in which that was done was to was to run various activity in certain groups, whether that's in contact centers or high net worth banking traders or whatever it might be, and then isolate them where you run exactly the same program but with no sporting angle to it. And it was about a 2% increase in employee retention over a year in those key audiences, which had quite a big payback if you think about the fact that it costs about 6 months worth of salary to get somebody back up to speed, and headcount costs and things like that. So it can be, my hypothesis, I think, would be that the B2E space would be one of the 3 biggest opportunities for mass participation sport in the next 2 years, in particular in the context of what we're going through from a COVID perspective at the moment, because you have a lot of organizations very short of connection with their employee base, who have to create some kind of sense of community, whether that's digitally or whether that's finally, we would hope, physically. And so for me, the employee piece is going to be back on the radar in Western Europe, probably for the first time since the Olympics were held in this continent, at least.
I think that's exactly right, and everything we're seeing and reading backs that up in terms of the medical field is actually saying, hey, look, if we don't get people to start moving, we're going to have a bigger issue coming out of this COVID situation. And that's a huge, I mean, the mass participation in sports is the answer, to a lot of that. So I think that's such an opportunity. And it's, whether it's, directly through the sponsorships or not, there's a huge opportunity and a need for people to get moving.
I mean, when we were talking, carry on, James, go.
I was just going to say, in terms of adding to what people have said, I think one of Limelight's key partners over the last few years has been Royal Bank of Canada, who have supported the Royal Parks Half Marathon, which became the Royal Parks running weekend, when the Race for the Kids initiative that was staged separately was then brought into the weekend. And for Royal Bank of Canada, the Royal Parks Half Marathon fulfills all of their key objectives across B2B, B2C, and B2 employee. They have 300 plus clients that come and run over the course of the weekend. They have families and friends taking part in Race for the Kids on the Saturday, which is a huge CSR and charity fundraising initiative for them. From a health and well-being perspective, the employees getting involved feel connected to the brand, and also fitter and healthier from a physical and mental health perspective. And then finally, one of the reasons they got in initially was to promote to the world that they weren't Royal Bank of Scotland. So, that's part of the reason why they got involved in the first place, to, be involved in that. And I guess the final piece is sustainability is at their heart of what they want to do and what they want to promote as a company. And with the Royal Parks Half Marathon being, one of the most sustainable half marathons in the world, and setting the standard for a lot of organisers to follow, it really does resonate and fit with their brand objectives. So it fits perfectly with their initiatives.
Thanks, James.
I just mentioned quickly, you picked up on something there, James. I think it's really important, where you should have talked about business to employee, and it kind of melted into customers and B2B a little bit, where you're talking about some of the activity that you're running. And I think that's a massive opportunity for mass participation as well. And the next bit of the jigsaw is be able to play with that difference, because frankly, if I were a mass participation race around the world now, I'd be going straight after corporate hospitality budgets that sit in businesses around the world, because it can be very hard. My Two Circles professional clients won't necessarily like me saying this, but it's been very hard to justify putting high net worth people or high target people in very small groups in stadia anytime soon, because experience maybe not the same, and the mandate isn't the same. So I would really think hard about that.
Well, I'd build on that. I completely agree. And a lot of businesses, banks in particular, have relied on high-end B2B as part of their justification. And a bit like when the Bribery Act came out in 2010-11, just before the Olympic Games in the UK, rather unhelpfully, suddenly B2B type sponsors were suddenly being told they couldn't justify, or had to change a lot of the hospitality rationale, which was a huge punch in the stomach for the sponsorship industry, because so much had been sort of priced within that. And then you've got COVID, which is just so not only does regulation encourage you not to do hospitality, but common sense and health also suggests it might not be a good reason. So it's actually a shot in the arm for the sponsorship industry, and particularly mass participation, because now you can start thinking about the true benefits. And B2E is a massive part of, particularly for big companies, a massive part of value. And the only trouble, I would say, to the moving budgets around, the biggest problem that the sponsorship industry faced, and certainly I was lucky at HSBC, is that most sponsorship budgets live in one silo or another, say marketing or corporate affairs or wherever it may be. So the B2E bit, which is really valuable to Matt's point, doesn't sit in marketing. So you've got to go right up the food chain to say, now we need to say that the hospitality budget is probably obsolete or whatever it may be. And now we want to take it out of the employee, the HR piece. And that's the trouble, is a lot of big businesses are just not set up for flexibility of budget, because the joy of sponsorship is it's multifaceted. But most are looking at it brand play. So for the real change to happen, exactly to Matt's point about taking the benefit where the benefit really lies, is companies need to look at the setup. And I think that all sponsorships should sit in the chief of staff's office, where they can see the whole, everything in the round, rather than media or within, whatever it may be. Because otherwise people don't like sharing budgets, and we all know that people don't.
Yeah, great insight. Thank you. I'm just going to grab a couple of comments here. Jerry Dawson, speaking about whilst we're on B2B, host location frequently spends significant amounts of cash to attract one-off B2B conferences, admittedly high-value customer that right return again in 5 or 10 years, where an MPS event slotted into a shoulder or off-season time slot can be there for many years to come. At Tap Caledonia in Scotland, UK's first ever closed road cycle event, superb case in point, 5,000 annual sold out places in May, definitely shoulder season at Scotland, windy and raining often, but significant economic impact and charity fundraising. James Robinson, how much did you pay Jerry Dawson to put that in the panel for you as right over there?
The check is definitely in the post.
Yeah. And look, it's interesting. I mean, it's accommodation. I'm having conversations with different cities about mass participation as a strategy, being open for business for mass participation, not just on a one-off, building venues in a way that they're mass participation friendly, and recognizing, how do we measure that? How long does the halo effect of a big rights fee get paid for, at the top of the tree, an Olympics or a Commonwealth Games? Clearly they have massive impact on cities, but building a New York Marathon or a Boston Marathon that's there forever and brings people back, I wonder if anyone's ever done a study, you might know this, Matt, to do some kind of comparisons to say, well, what is I'm not saying we necessarily need to go to an Olympic or a Commonwealth Games, but a World Championships in a sport, significant rights fees paid and so on. Yes, lots of exposure, but an ongoing program of a big mass participation event, recognizing that they don't become New York's and Boston's overnight, but the opportunity to impact not only from an economic impact, but also the impact on the health and well-being of citizens in those cities.
I guess I haven't seen a study, but I have lived it personally, seeing running Boston myself and seeing that the impact of John Hancock as a sponsor of that race intrinsically linked to the local community and frankly everything the Boston Marathon is about, and it's deeply powerful. I'm not sure it was targeted me as somebody who came in for 4 days, didn't run very well and then went home, but I absolutely noticed the value of longevity of a commercial partner in this regard. I think the same is true for many years with the Great North Run and Bupa. And to Giles's point, I do think if Bupa had that sponsorship again, they'd probably do it very differently to how they did it way back when, focusing on logo hoardings and the BBC. So no study, but intuitively it feels like sort of length of tenure with going deep with a discrete audience as opposed to a one-off burst with everybody has to make sense for businesses that are very focused on lifetime value and not customer acquisition.
Thanks,
but
Matt.
I think the opportunity though, Matt, as well with the mass participation space is that the flagship moment, whether it's the Great North Run or the London Triathlon or London Marathon or New York Marathon, is only part of the process, and that has to be celebrated. But it's 12 months of the year. We talk about the journey, and I think sometimes we underestimate the value of that. As I said earlier, most people are engaged with marathon training for 6-12 months. And, you know, for that perspective, there needs to be key moments throughout the year where the agencies or the rights holders are tapping into other opportunities that can help the consumer on the journey, building content, driving awareness at the non-event stage, because otherwise we get into a situation that Chris alluded to before, which is entries are open, hi, how are you doing? And event goes on, make sure you turn up all right, and then thanks very much for your entry, will you pay again? And that's been the cyclical approach. And we've got to get better at recognizing the value of the process that the individual takes to get to the event itself.
And that for me is where, from a B2C perspective, I think it's about being very focused around the insight that your data enables. And therefore, I think, Chris, when you and I talked last time, we talked about, in due course, we think there'll be more kind of boutique type events, which are razor focused on a certain demographic and go deep with them. And in particular, I think one of the things we'll see in the next 3 to 4 years is more boutique focused events that are very much on kind of influential groups and communities that can drive mainstream penetration for newer brands. If anyone for me is spot on. So Airwalk drove the entire brand through understanding the skateboarding community in detail, going to that community as a means of driving influence for the brand into mainstream. And I think we'll see a lot more use of mass participation in that regard in B2C, where we're not talking about kind of one weekend worth of activity with 50,000 people. We're talking about a whole year's worth of activity, to your point, James, to 100 people, but they're the right 100 people because our data tells us so.
Yeah, great insights. Thank you. Let's go, we're getting pretty tight on time. I'd be interested to get some insights into the skill sets and tools that are now needed to activate in the new era. Why don't we start there with you, Michelle? What's your sense of what those might be? You know, I guess from both sides of the fence. You know, you've got great experience on both sides, but what do rights holders need to be kind of schooling up on, and what do sponsors and brands need to be more aware of?
Right. I think on both sides, creativity is really where it's at. I think certainly from a brand perspective, transitioning from, again, just one-off sponsorships to really using these sponsorships as tent poles to authenticate your position within the platform and the space in the industry, but you know, building it out well beyond those individual sponsorships. So and that goes to everything both James and Matt was just saying in terms of just that longevity, right? The sponsorship is this wonderful tentpole event, but you really have to go year round. And if you're truly invested in that platform, that's not too challenging, right? Like it should be quite, you know, in some ways quite natural. I think a lot of, you know, as a brand, what we're doing during this unique time is, you know, obviously live events aren't happening, and it's really disappointing. But we've got communities that still want to hear from us, right? We still want to engage our clients and our employees, and so we've had to fill in some gaps and create assets that do that basically really keep people together and while we still look forward to these massive tentpole sponsorships.
It's fantastic to hear you are doing that. And one of the things I've been quite incredulous about, and as someone who doesn't now sit in the sponsorship industry directly, is how many brands who invested hundreds of millions of dollars in various associations have switched off as COVID has turned up. And I find it astonishing because for me, all you're trying to do with a sponsorship is to talk to a consumer base. And as we all know, whether it's mass participation, soccer or baseball, if you're a fan of something, you love it. Yeah. And you love it all the time, 365. It's not when it switches on and off, it's all the time. And Twitter is awash of people bemoaning the lack of X, Y, Z, and all of those things. And yet brands seem to have switched off in a sort of paralysis of budget of what are we going to do now because our event isn't happening, when in fact you have a captive audience of people who you're trying to get to sell your product are absolutely, you can be the Robin Hood at that point, probably better than at any other time in history, which is when there is a distress in the thing that you've associated with to try and alleviate that. And that's the great joy, again, of digital. And I think one of the things I've been really interested in as I've sort of learned the difference between data and digital is that they're different. Data is just people, and digital is how you bring that to life. And this is an opportunity that so many brands, both in mass participation and particularly outside, have just failed, in my view. And it's really great to hear, Michelle, that you are doing it, because I wish more were.
And I think it goes even beyond just the responsibility and the desire and the want to keep engaged with those target communities. I think even for us, this has been such an opportunity. I mean, look, it's a set place in the industry right now, but I'm just so jazzed about the opportunity as well. We've been able to, I mean, something so incredible. We've been able to take this time when, again, live events aren't happening and relook at what do we have to offer, right? What are as an organization, what are our strengths and what can we give back to these partners that we work with throughout the year to help them, right? And what we've heard across the years and from all of the partners that we work with, race partners, is that theme of sustainability that came up earlier, right, from James. And we've decided to use this time to dive into that. So we've gathered up some of our, race partners that are very active in this space. We've gathered the World Marathon Majors and some outside sustainability groups, and we've put together a challenge. And look, as a company, we're problem solvers, and we've got some folks that have some opportunity to solve more problems. So we're putting together the challenge to them, and we're using this time to come up with ideas that could help the larger running space in the future, solve and get to that sustainability challenge that we'll implement in 2021, right? It's not a now, it's for the future, but to be able to use this time to keep our partners in the industry engaged and to use it productively to solve a problem. And we're really jazzed about that and to continue to do that. So yes, we're absolutely also engaging runners still, but I think there's that other piece of it in terms of making sure that you're still looking at how to make the industry as a whole better and the world, right? That's what it's about.
Wow. If there's a better example of passion than that, Michelle, to bring us to the end, I would just like to see how wonderfully animated you are. That's just fantastic. Typically what I do is we're about 2 minutes to the wrap, and I normally wrap it up. But what I'm going to ask today is in line with our title, will there be opportunities for brands in mass participation sport? I'd like to just throw to each of you to say what you see. Clearly there's opportunities from what I've seen here, but each one of you, just maybe starting with you, James, at the top of my screen, what do you see as the big opportunity for brands in mass participation sport?
I think the market is significantly bigger than most of us probably realize. There's a lot of talk about traditional mistake that the industry makes is selling the event and selling the number of people that are on the start line. But those individual people, we've talked about the richness of the data that you have from those individual people, but they also have a huge influence on their social network. And, the market is increasing, particularly, COVID-19 has driven a lot more people towards health and activity, and the active world is getting bigger and bigger, which is great because there's more interest in the space. To give you an idea of the size of the market, there was 14 billion searches for active world content in 2018. And a lot of the time, organizers are selling, we've got a 5,000 person race or otherwise. So the market is huge, with the rich beauty of the data that we can capture and the value proposition that we can now sell. I think the opportunity is there to really create some amazing opportunities and campaigns that resonate with the brands and match those brands with their fans. And for me, that's where the opportunity lies. And we can move away from the more transactional, commoditized dots and spots approach.
Thanks, James. How about you, Matt?
Well, firstly, I completely agree with that. And ultimately, my counsel, I think, to the audience here would be not getting too focused on and too terrified by the data word and the technology word. That's the enabler for real understanding of your audience to drive bespoke campaigns for brands. And for me, those bespoke campaigns are in the B2E space, in a disaffected, disconnected workforce post-COVID. They're in focused areas of B2C, where the influence that you now understand you have at your fingertips through the insight you gather can really be used to drive big things through small numbers of people. And therefore, targeted B2B in a world where corporate hospitality will never look the same again. Yeah, that would be my 2 pence.
Thanks. Michelle, I'm conscious we're right on the hour, and I think you've got to race to another meeting. Maybe you want to give your wrap, and you can drop off if you need to. We've got a couple of questions that we might take if anyone wants to stay on, but if you have to drop off, Michelle, would you like to maybe just give your thought, please?
Sure, and I'm good, actually. I rearranged. Thank
you.
you. But I think going back again, this opportunity is to reground both event organizers and sponsors in your purpose and your values, right? Making sure that you're very clear on that. And then anytime there's an opportunity to solve a problem, and clearly technology plays a large role in solving a lot of problems, but data, right? That's what it's about, is getting that data so that you can solve a problem, right? So whether it's for the runners themselves, the event participants, the event organizers, I think that's powerful, and there's a lot of value in that.
Thanks, Michelle. Giles, you and anyone else who's still on the call, we will come to the questions. We've got a couple. We're running a couple of minutes over, but we'll come to your questions.
Well, I think it's been very well wrapped up. I think the sports industry in general has been very, very slow, unlike other industries, to understand its own consumer base. And it's been very assumptive and just hoped that the eyeballs was enough. And that was the kind of the business model that was started around about the Nielsen time in the mid-60s. And sport, if it wants to be seen as a commercial entity attracting big investors, be they sponsors or investment, need to understand the consumer base. Understanding of first-party data is the key. It exists, the technology exists. It didn't before, it now does. And that would be the investment to start with. If you know your consumer, you've got something to sell.
Fantastic, thanks. Let's quickly go to a couple of the questions. Sam Renouf, with such reliance on entry fees as an income source and the likelihood that participation sizes will drop and operational costs will rise post-COVID, at least until a vaccine is found, is the current business model for mass participation sustainable? James, you want to throw that one in your court as a rights holder, organizer?
Craig, our CEO, has been very, very strong on this, that the mass participation model as it exists at the moment is completely broken, and we have to remodel it. So I agree with Sam. You know, we're looking towards those answers, and we do need to look at where the revenue streams come. And I think, you know, one of the challenges that a lot of people will face is, you know, the charity sector has taken a huge hammering. So, you know, the charity investment in mass participation sport has also been quite significant. So as an industry as a whole, we do need to look at the business model and, you know, pivot that model to make it more sustainable.
Thank you. Taylor Host, are sponsors willing to pay additional for one-to-one access to endurance participants? Is this a thing? Should this be a thing? I'd like to take that.
What do you mean one-to-one access?
I'm guessing it's the way I'm reading it, Taylor, is that I guess direct introductions rather than the opportunities to engage in an event. Are you suggesting that it's a facilitator? There's a premium on me as a sponsor can, me as a rights holder can directly introduce you to one of the participants to set up a meeting for you. I'm thinking that that's what you're saying. Is there a premium for something that's directly facilitated?
I think that would be a difficult, it's a difficult one. You can kind of imagine it happening by association and by proxy, but to do it directly, I don't think sponsors would necessarily pay for that more. I think they'd expect that as part of the association. In any case, they're trying to create a conversation, whether it be virtually, physically, through a partnership. I don't think they would pay any more. Personally, I think I would expect that as part of the kind of the core one of the core benefits would be my thing. But it's an interesting question.
I agree. It's generally part of the value package, right? It's what you're after. That's your target audience, and segmented in even for us, right? When we're working with partners, within restrictions and all that kind of stuff, we do sometimes want that very targeted sliver of, we want to talk to the chief technology officers, and if they're gathering the data from their event of who is in that CXO role, or that is very valuable to us to be able to have a conversation and provide them a unique offering of perhaps running with our team and getting these extra benefits, right? And starting that conversation. So yes, but that is generally part of that value package, is part of why we're, attracted to the sponsorship or engagement in the first place.
Is there a case to say that, maybe as we move towards somewhat of a performance-based model, that potentially becomes one of the metrics to say, you facilitated introduction to, ex-CXO in your place. So, part of the deal is if you can introduce us to 10 CXOs who participate in the event that leads to business, then your sponsorship investment will scale based on a success fee, so to speak. So maybe it speaks to that it's kind of built into the performance element of the package.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, especially for B2B companies, sometimes it comes from the participants, sometimes it comes from the introduction to other partners, right? So I think thinking about it broadly is helpful.
Yeah. Interesting. I think, sorry, we got one more here. I think a couple of people jumped off there. Sally Bliss, Heineken sponsorship of Race to the Tower Ultra is a good example of B2E driven sponsorship. Sally, you've put let me just see if I can copy this link in here and just put it in to the general chat. And I think you've just given it to the panelists. I'll pop it back in here if anyone wants to look at that. Folks, I think we're pretty much out of time. Thank you for staying over. Please join me in a big thank you from the top of the screen. James Robinson, Matt Rogan, Giles Morgan, and Michelle Taylor. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you next week. I'll confirm the details, whether that's going to be, I think most likely it might be the data-driven one. But as always, same time next week. And thanks so much for your support. Thanks again to our panelists. Have a great day. Sleep well wherever you are. And we'll see you soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.